Now we're in the knowledge economy. And you can ask yourself, what happens in the knowledge economy? Is efficiency still more important than meaning? I think the answer is no. I think that as we move to a situation in which people have to decide on their own about how much effort, attention, caring, how connected they feel to it, are they thinking about labor on their way to work and in the shower and so on, all of a sudden, Mark has more things to say to us. So when we think about labor, we usually think about motivation and payment as the same thing. But the reality is that we should probably add all kinds of things to it. Meaning, creation, challenges, ownership, identity, pride, etc. And the good news is that if we added all of those components and thought about them, how do we create our own meaning, pride, motivation, and how do we do it in our workplace and for the employees, I think we could get people to both be more productive and happier. And thank you very much.
Dan Ariely, Dr. Dan Ariely, twice over, social scientist. Welcome to the JSO interview.
Thank you, nice to be here.
That introductory clip speaks to the fact that you are a social scientist. You've given TED Talks that have had viewership of at least 5 million people. You've written 3 books, Predictably Irrational, The Upside of Irrationality, The Honest Truth About Dishonesty. Why are you in Kenya?
So I'm interested in human behavior. I'm interested in analyzing what kind of things people do wrong and how we can fix it. And we've been looking at all kinds of ways in which people behave badly. I mean, I'll just ask you, in the last month, have you eaten more than you think you should?
Yes, indeed.
Have you exercised less than you think you should?
Yes, indeed.
Have you ever texted while driving?
No, I haven't.
You haven't? Never?
Never.
Very good. How about unprotected sex? Unplanned, unprotected sex?
Never since I got married, no.
Okay.
But the interview has to run to me.
Okay.
Otherwise we'll switch roles.
So if you think about all of those mistakes, these are things that people do routinely, and we know that we will keep on doing them in the future. And one of those is about saving for the future. It's one of those same category of problems. And we have been trying to get the poor to save a little bit of money for a rainy day. So here's what happens. You live basically hand to mouth. Imagine that your income is at the same level of your expenses, and you have a cow, just for example. And then one day the cow becomes sick, and for a month the cow is out of commission. What happens? You have a month of income that you don't have, but you also have to borrow money at maybe 10% a week. At the end of that month, even if your cow becomes healthy again, you are really behind and you can never catch up. And this is why it's so important to save a little bit of money for a rainy day. So what we're doing here is, together with M-Pesa and your retirement fund and the World Bank, we're trying to create experiments that would encourage people in the informal sector to save a little bit of money for a rainy day. And we're trying different versions. We're using things like guilt and things like trust and pre-commitment and all kinds of mechanisms from social science to encourage people to save a little bit more.
When you talk about being a social scientist, my apprehension is that all of this is in a very strict cultural context. You are an Israeli American, you live in the US, you teach at Duke University, I know all that about you.
Yes.
What you have to say about society has nothing to do with our culture and our way of life. Are your results empirical?
So, first of all, they are empirical because we do it empirically in the US. Your question is whether they will apply
exactly
to Kenya.
Exactly.
So, I think this is a good question, right? It's a reasonable question, and we haven't tested all of our results to see if they would translate, but I'll give you one example. We've been doing experiments on dishonesty. And in these experiments on dishonesty, we do something very simple. We give people a sheet of paper. We say there are 20 questions on this sheet of paper. I'll give you $1 for each question you solve correctly. You have 5 minutes to go. If you got this sheet, you will start to work as fast as you can. At the end of the 5 minutes, I will say stop, put the pencil down, and count how many questions you got correctly. Now take the sheet, go to the back of the room and shred that piece of paper. But still remember how many questions you got correctly. Come to the front of the room, tell me how many questions you got correctly, and I'll pay you. People do this, they say they solve 6 problems, we pay them $6, they go home. What the people in the experiment don't know is that we played with a shredder. The shredder only shreds the sides of the page, but the main body of the page remains intact, and we can find out how many questions people really solve correctly. And what do we find? On average, people solve 4 and report to be solving 6. And it's not that we find some big cheaters, we find a ton of little cheaters.
Right. Well, I'll say the same. I presented a sort of a quiz show for high school students. And when I went back to talk to my friends, I asked them whether they could have answered the questions that the students were answering on the show. And invariably, everybody said, you know, I'd have answered all of them correctly. But the truth is that I, as presenter, was, unless I had been given the answers just to read out,
yes,
putting myself as an example, I couldn't have got 100%. But people always say, we love your show, we just sit there and answer 100%. So you're basically saying we all lie to a certain extent.
A little
bit.
But
I'm going to go fast forward because of time.
Let's talk about the cultural. Yeah.
We all lie. We can talk about the cultural, if you can put them all in, because I know this could be a scintillating conversation where we just won't have time. I want to fast forward to the idea of whatever we do. Your book is suggesting that there is no, your most recent book, The Honest Truth About Dishonesty, is that there is no such thing as ethical, moral conduct. In the same way that every individual has his price and you can buy them off, every individual at some point will lie, will do something wrong, unethical.
Yeah, so, you know, I don't want to say every individual because, you know, I haven't tested Mother Teresa, for example, or the Dalai Lama, so I don't want to say every individual. But in general, we find that in our experiments, 80% of the people lie a little bit. And just to finish the cultural thought, we ran these experiments in Israel, of course, in the US, in the UK, in Germany, in Italy, in China. In South America, we haven't done Africa, we're doing Africa next. In South Africa we did, and we're finding no differences so far. So at least in dishonesty, we've tested lots of places around the world and we find that people are basically have the same capacity to cheat a little bit and still think of themselves as good people. And if you think about this kind of goes back to the question of what defines the boundaries on which we're going to decide to start being honest. And you could say that it's because of fearing of being caught. That you say, oh my goodness, I don't want to be caught, and therefore I'm going to be safe. But think about the following. Do you know people that have illegal downloaded material on their computers? Software, music, stuff like that?
Yes, of course. I dare say myself.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you feel guilty about it?
No.
No. Okay, so let's take this example. Now let's think about something else. Imagine you went to a restaurant and you wanted to escape at the end of the meal without paying. In the last 3 years, every time I go to eat, I ask the waiter if they can recommend the way to eat in that restaurant and escape without paying. I say, look, I'm not going to do it, just give me advice of how to do it. They always have good advice. Wait for a big party to come in, there's a back alley, there's the bathroom, they have suggestions. And then I say, and how often do people do it? They almost never do it. Now think about these two cases. What's the difference between them? Why would you feel such a terrible human being if you ate in a restaurant and escape without paying, even though you could do it and there'll be no consequences? Illegal download doesn't bother you. Because one of them is multiple steps removed from money. Everybody else is doing it. There's an agreement in society that that's just what we do. And this is basically what corruption is about. Corruption is about taking a particular part of behavior, paying a policeman a bribe, you can think about yourself what kind of corruption you want to talk about, and basically saying this is not a moral issue anymore. We're basically throwing it aside. People who are corrupt doesn't mean that they cheat in every aspect of their lives. It means that they took some aspect of their life and say we're not worried about it. And this is, by the way,
we'll never get caught.
Even if they get caught, they're not worried about it because it's socially acceptable. So if you think about it...
So to the Kenyan context, I really do want the conversation to be sort of have that focus. And I'm going to tell you about something about Kenyan society. Maybe that's an admission too. This is a society that considers itself highly religious.
Yes.
Everybody will wish to be declared in social context as a very devout Christian or a very devout Muslim.
Yeah.
In this highly Christian society where people are behaving properly, we also rank number 4 in the world, or maybe let's make it the top 20 of the most corrupt nations in the world, about maybe 200.
Yeah.
The disconnect there, you're saying that we feel it's all right to be that way?
That's right. So if you think about it, religion doesn't establish moral code for every aspect of behavior. Religion establishes some moral code for behavior in some domains. For example, how much money you should give to the church.
Right, okay, I don't know. You're Israeli American, but I would say that one of the codes, the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not steal. Therefore, actually, again, in our society, why is it ridden with these huge corruption scandals? Because you're suggesting, because I'm trying to follow your drift. I mean, I'm not a doctor of behavioral science. You're saying it's because it's okay to be that way. So, as a Kenyan, you expect me to believe that it's okay to steal.
So stealing is different than lying.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So for example, when you pay a policeman a bribe, it's not stealing.
Right.
It's lying. And by the way, there's no commandment against lying.
Right.
There's a commandment against not bearing false witness, which is very interesting, which is very different from lying.
Right.
There's some nice stories in the Bible about lying. But the interesting thing about this is I think that the religious code captures a few specific behaviors. Don't think about the Ten Commandments. Think about how religion is practiced. The way religion is practiced, religion is getting people to do specific things while in church. For example, Christian people in the US donate more to charity, but only on Sunday. On the rest of the days of the week, they don't donate more to charity. When they think about religion, when they are part of the religious process, they behave more in according with the rules, but not later in time. But the fact that we think about that Kenya is such a religious country, I think can give us some suggestions of how to change corruption. So some of the experiments we've done have been experiments on the Catholic confession. If you think about the Catholic confession from an economic perspective, it should get people to be more dishonest. Because if you can sin and get confessed and get resolved, everything is forgiven, wouldn't you sin more?
Exactly.
Wouldn't you sin on the way to confession to minimize time in purgatory, to minimize the probability? But we've done experiments on confession, and what confession does is to open a new page. Think about it. If you're a sinner, why would you stop today? Why shouldn't you stop tomorrow? If you're a corrupt individual who pay bribes and so on, tomorrow is a good day to be corrupt as well. Why would you stop? And because of that, I think that one of the solutions is to do something like a confession. But it has to be at the countrywide level. Think about the South African Reconciliation Act. Right? Here was a country that was running in an apartheid era with all kinds of terrible rules, and they wanted to move away from this. Is there a smooth transition? Sadly, there's a smooth deterioration where you have a slippery slope and the countries become more and more corrupt over time. There's no increase in morality. There's no smooth increase. So a Day of Atonement, a Catholic confession, the Reconciliation Act basically puts us a line in the sand and saying, this is how we've been, and we're going to change today, and all of us are going to change. You see, corruption is a game of a social coordination where everybody has to change at the same time. If I stop being corrupt today and you're going to wait another week, it's not going to work out. So, maybe this is going to be the 50th anniversary for Kenya. Right. Maybe that's a good opportunity to say, we tried it out one way, let's take a break and start something fresh.